It was supposed to be a routine checkup, one of those appointments that most people barely give a second thought. I walked into the waiting room, greeted by the usual sterile scent of antiseptic and the buzz of hushed conversations. A light breeze from the air conditioning stirred the magazines on the coffee table, but the atmosphere was far from relaxing. Then, I noticed her. A woman, maybe in her late 50s, sitting stiffly in a chair, eyes darting between the door and the clock on the wall. She looked uneasy, as if something had unsettled her deeply. And as fate would have it, we were scheduled for the same doctor. The nurse called her name first. "Miss Evans?" The nurse said, smiling as she gestured for her to follow. The woman stood up, her heels clicking sharply against the floor, and as she passed by me, her eyes scanned me up and down. There was a flicker of something, an unreadable look, before she turned away and walked toward the examination rooms. I didn't think much of it. Until I was called next. "Dr. Carter will see you now," the nurse announced, leading me to the same corridor. And there he was, Dr. Carter, a tall man with an impeccable smile, dark skin, and an aura of calm professionalism. His office was pristine, just as you'd expect, with certificates on the walls and a large, comfortable chair facing his desk. But just as I was about to sit down, I heard the unmistakable sound of hurried footsteps. The woman from earlier, Ms. Evans, was at the door again, speaking with another nurse. Her voice, though low, was laced with frustration. "I can't be seen by him," she said firmly, her words more demanding than polite. The nurse appeared confused. "Excuse me, Ms. Evans. I don't want to be treated by him," she said, a bit louder now. "Can you get me another doctor? I don't feel comfortable." The nurse hesitated, then nodded, leading her away. I could feel the tension hanging in the air. What had just happened? I watched them leave and was left with the quiet hum of fluorescent lights overhead. I was about to see a doctor. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something strange was unfolding in front of me. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. The walls seemed to close in as I sat there, feeling a strange unease in the pit of my stomach. The incident with Ms. Evans left me unsettled, and as much as I tried to brush it off, the memory of her words echoed in my mind. She didn't want to be treated by Dr. Carter simply because of the color of his skin. It felt wrong. But the waiting room was silent again, as if nothing had happened, as if everything was normal. Finally, the door to Dr. Carter's office opened, and the nurse appeared with a clipboard. "Dr. Carter is ready for you," she said, smiling warmly. I nodded, standing up and following her into the corridor. As we approached the door to his office, I couldn't help but notice the look of resignation on the nurse's face. It was as if this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. When I entered, Dr. Carter stood from his chair, his smile as welcoming as before. But as I stepped inside, I saw something on his face that I hadn't noticed before, an almost imperceptible flicker of tension, as if he was bracing for something. I sat down, trying to put aside my lingering discomfort. "Good afternoon, Ms. Hayes," Dr. Carter said, his voice steady and calm. "What brings you in today?" I started talking about the symptoms I had been experiencing, but I could feel that something was different about today. The usual warm interaction between a doctor and patient wasn't quite there. I wondered if he had heard about Ms. Evans's refusal, but I didn't dare ask. Then the door opened again, and a figure stepped into the room. It was Ms. Evans. She was back, but this time she wasn't alone. The nurse who had initially escorted her in was with her, and they were talking in low voices. The nurse seemed to be apologizing, but Ms. Evans was clearly still upset. "I'm not going to stand for this," Ms. Evans snapped, looking directly at Dr. Carter, her voice cold and cutting. "I demand to speak to someone else. I refuse to be treated by someone like him." The nurse tried to calm her down, but it was clear the woman was agitated, almost shaking with anger. I was in shock, watching as the situation escalated. But as she stormed toward the door, she slipped. It happened in an instant. Ms. Evans lost her footing and fell, crashing hard onto the tiled floor. The room went silent as she lay there, visibly stunned. Dr. Carter was the first to react. "Ms. Evans," he called out, rushing over to her. The nurse and I immediately stood up, but Dr. Carter was already kneeling beside her, his hands gentle yet firm as he checked her over. For a moment, all the animosity, all the tension, seemed to evaporate. The woman who had just moments ago refused his care was now vulnerable, and he was the one tending to her. "Are you all right?" he asked calmly, his voice filled with concern. Ms. Evans didn't respond immediately, but after a few moments, she slowly nodded, her face red with embarrassment. "Please, just, take me to another doctor," she said, her tone now more subdued, almost apologetic. But Dr. Carter didn't move. "I'm the one here to help you, Ms. Evans," he said softly. "And I will do just that. I think you're okay, but we'll make sure." She didn't argue this time. She simply looked at him, and for the first time, her eyes softened just a little. It was a quiet moment, an uncomfortable, awkward silence that seemed to stretch on forever. Karma had struck faster than I could have imagined, and there was no running from it now. The room remained eerily quiet as Dr. Carter gently helped Ms. Evans back to her feet. She winced slightly but didn't protest, her earlier arrogance replaced by something closer to humility. I watched the scene unfold, still trying to process everything that had happened in such a short time. Dr. Carter's professionalism never wavered. He steadied her, making sure she was stable before guiding her back to the chair. He didn't rush her. He didn't make her feel foolish. Instead, he handled it with the kind of calm composure that only someone truly dedicated to their profession could muster. "Take a deep breath," he said to her, his voice reassuring. "You've had a little scare, but you're going to be just fine." I could see her fighting back tears, perhaps from a mixture of embarrassment and frustration. But there was no more hostility in her eyes, no more of the disdain that had been so obvious before. Only a quiet acknowledgement of the man who had, despite her earlier rejection, stepped up to care for her when she needed it most. The nurse hovered awkwardly in the background, no doubt uncertain about how to proceed. She had seen this kind of thing before, but today felt different. Today, it wasn't just a routine doctor-patient interaction. It was a reckoning. Dr. Carter turned his attention back to me after making sure Ms. Evans was comfortable. "Ms. Hayes, I apologize for the disruption," he said, his tone warm yet professional. "Shall we continue your checkup?" I nodded, still processing everything that had just happened. My mind was spinning, but I couldn't deny the respect I felt for Dr. Carter. In the face of anger, prejudice, and chaos, he had remained calm, kind, and above all, professional. As the checkup proceeded, I couldn't help but glance over at Ms. Evans from time to time. She had her head down now, her hands folded in her lap as she tried to regain her composure. It was clear that the whole situation had affected her in ways that went beyond the physical. But what I found most striking was the way Dr. Carter treated her, not with the bitterness or animosity she might have expected, but with the same unwavering dedication he gave to all of his patients. When my appointment came to an end, Dr. Carter stood, offering me a final, reassuring smile. "You're all set. If you have any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out." I nodded, standing up and making my way toward the door. As I reached for the handle, I caught a glimpse of Ms. Evans. Her posture had softened, and she seemed to be reflecting on something, perhaps on the lesson that had unfolded before her eyes. Just before I left, I overheard Dr. Carter speaking to the nurse. "I'll take care of her. Let's make sure she gets the treatment she deserves." The nurse nodded, and I walked out of the office, feeling a strange sense of closure. It wasn't just about a doctor and a patient, it was about something bigger, something more fundamental than any of us realized. As I stepped into the bright sunlight outside, I couldn't help but think how quickly things had changed. How, in a matter of minutes, everything had turned upside down. Karma, as they say, really doesn't take its time. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I found myself replaying the events in Dr. Carter's office over and over, trying to make sense of it all. What happened between Ms. Evans and him wasn't just about her refusal of care, it was about a deeper, unspoken tension, something that lurked beneath the surface, simmering until it couldn't be ignored anymore. But as I went through my routine, the thought of karma lingered in my mind. It felt like a silent, undeniable force, reminding me that the universe has a way of balancing things out, even when it seems impossible. Ms. Evans had been so certain, so rigid in her beliefs, and yet, in the blink of an eye, she found herself humbled. The irony wasn't lost on me. That evening, as I sat down for dinner, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my friend, Claire. "Did you hear what happened at Dr. Carter's office today?" the text read. I stared at it for a moment, confused. How did Claire know? I quickly typed a reply. "What are you talking about?" She responded almost instantly. There was an incident. Ms. Evans, the woman who refused Dr. Carter, slipped and fell in the office. They had to take her to the emergency room. I blinked, stunned. I had seen it happen right in front of me. But I hadn't realized the full extent. She had actually been injured, seriously enough to require further treatment. And all of it had unfolded so quickly. As the night went on, I couldn't stop thinking about how the events had unfolded. The feeling that things had played out as they were meant to, something almost cosmic in nature, stayed with me. I thought about Ms. Evans lying on the floor, surrounded by the very man she had tried to refuse. In that moment, I realized it wasn't just the fall that had shaken her, it was everything that had led up to it. And then, I thought about Dr. Carter. He had been the epitome of grace under pressure. Despite the circumstances, he hadn't shown anger, bitterness, or even frustration. He had been focused on one thing, taking care of a patient in need. It was a rare quality to see in the face of such tension, and it made me respect him even more. As I lay in bed that night, drifting into sleep, the lessons from that day began to settle in. Karma was powerful, yes, but it wasn't just about retribution. It was about balance. About people getting exactly what they needed when they least expected it. It was about humanity, about humility, and about the unexpected ways life teaches its lessons. I couldn't shake the thought that somehow, all of us, even Ms. Evans, had been given a moment to reflect. A chance to learn from the situation, however painful. I could only hope that, like me, she would carry the lesson with her. Because in the end, Dr. Carter hadn't just saved her physically that day. He had also given her something more valuable, a moment of reckoning, a chance to rethink her beliefs. And I couldn't help but feel that, in a strange way, it was the most meaningful part of the entire experience. The days that followed were quieter. Ms. Evans, I heard, had returned to her appointments, though I never saw her again. I couldn't help but wonder about her. Had the incident changed her in some way? Was she still holding on to the same rigid views she had before? Or had she allowed herself to reflect, to reconsider her previous actions? One evening, a week after the incident, I received an email from Dr. Carter's office. It was a standard follow-up about my checkup, asking if I had any further questions or concerns. But what caught my attention was the message in the signature: "Thank you for your patience and understanding during the incident with another patient. We hope your experience with us remains positive." It was brief, but it was a small gesture of acknowledgement, a quiet reminder that Dr. Carter and his team were aware of the discomfort that had taken place. I appreciated it in an odd way. It felt like they were acknowledging the situation without needing to say too much, just enough for me to know that they, too, were reflecting on the event. A few more days passed, and life returned to normal. Yet, I found myself thinking back to that moment, the one when karma had come so swiftly for Ms. Evans. That was the real kicker. Not the fall itself, but how fast it all happened, how quickly the universe had shifted in a way that left no room for escape. And then there was Dr. Carter. He continued to be the same calm, collected professional, unshaken by the events that had unfolded. It occurred to me then that his reaction had not been just about managing a patient, it was about managing the chaos around him. It was about holding on to your values, your humanity, when everything else was falling apart. I realized I had learned something from him, something more profound than I had expected. In moments of conflict, in moments of discomfort, the way we choose to react can say more about us than anything else. Dr. Carter had shown me that grace wasn't just about how we treated others when things were easy. It was about how we responded when things got difficult, when people were at their worst. Karma had a funny way of working, I thought. Sometimes it was slow, like the gradual unraveling of a tightly wound thread. But other times, it hit fast, so fast that it knocked you off your feet before you even saw it coming. As for Ms. Evans, wherever she was, I hoped she found a little peace. Perhaps she would reflect on the kindness that Dr. Carter had shown her, even when she had initially rejected it. Perhaps she would find it in herself to challenge the biases that had held her so tightly. I couldn't know for sure. But I hoped. The experience stayed with me, long after my appointment was over. And when I saw people in the world behaving out of anger, or disdain, or fear, I thought back to that day. I thought about how fast things could change, and how sometimes, the universe had a way of setting things right, even when we least expected it. Weeks passed, and life continued its course. I found myself thinking back to that day with Dr. Carter and Ms. Evans more often than I expected. Something about the way events had unfolded stuck with me, how quickly everything had shifted, how one moment of pride and rejection had led to something far more humbling. I never saw Ms. Evans again, but there was one moment that caught me by surprise. I had gone back for a follow-up appointment, not with Dr. Carter this time, but with another specialist. As I waited in the quiet of the lobby, the door to the office opened, and in stepped a woman I recognized. It was Ms. Evans. She seemed different now, her posture more relaxed, her expression more subdued. She had a gentleness in her step that I hadn't noticed before, as if the weight of her earlier actions had somehow changed her. She glanced up, saw me, and froze for just a moment. I didn't know what to say. It wasn't like we had ever spoken much beyond the brief exchange in Dr. Carter's office, but the tension between us felt palpable. It felt like there was something unsaid, something unfinished that hovered in the air. I smiled gently, offering a nod of acknowledgement. It was a quiet, neutral gesture, nothing too confrontational, nothing too revealing. But to my surprise, she smiled back. I just wanted to say thank you, she said softly, her voice quieter than I had ever heard it. For being patient with me, back there. I don't know what came over me. I nodded, a little caught off guard. Of course, I replied. We all have our moments. She looked down at the floor for a moment before continuing. I've been thinking a lot about that day. And I realize now how foolish I was. I was wrong, and, well, I guess I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Her apology hung in the air, awkward but genuine. I could see the weight of it in her eyes, the vulnerability she had avoided before. It was a different version of her now, a softer, more self-aware version. I appreciate that, I said, the words feeling heavier than they should have. I think we all have a lot to learn. She nodded, as if she understood exactly what I meant. And just like that, the tension melted. The unspoken animosity was gone, replaced by something more understanding. Something that didn't require words but simply acknowledgement. As she turned and walked down the hallway, I watched her go, thinking that perhaps, just maybe, we all had moments like this, moments where we had to confront our own pride, our own biases, and ultimately come to terms with them. And it wasn't always easy. But in the end, it was those moments of growth that defined us. Not the ones where we had it all figured out, but the ones where we stumbled and realized, just in time, that there was something better waiting on the other side of our flaws. Karma hadn't just taught Ms. Evans a lesson. It had offered her a chance to grow, to change, and to make amends. And in that brief moment, I realized that we could all be given such chances, if we were open enough to recognize them. It had been nearly a month since that day in Dr. Carter's office, and the experience still lingered in my mind, the way certain moments do, when they're so unexpected, so charged with meaning, that they echo for far longer than they should. One evening, I received an unexpected email from Dr. Carter's office. It was a general update about the practice, but one part caught my attention. Under patient feedback, there was a mention of a new program that was being launched. The Healing Through Understanding program, a chance to discuss, reflect, and heal from personal biases. Intrigued, I clicked on the link, curious about what it was about. The page detailed a new initiative aimed at promoting open dialogue between patients and healthcare providers, particularly around issues of race, biases, and prejudice, areas often left unaddressed in medical settings. Dr. Carter had been a part of the team that had launched this program. The more I read, the more I realized how profoundly the incident with Ms. Evans had affected him, too. He wasn't just offering medical care anymore. He was offering a chance for healing, for learning, for addressing something far deeper than what met the eye. The program, I discovered, was designed to create a safe space where patients could talk about their discomforts or biases toward their doctors, and vice versa. It was an open forum to address difficult, uncomfortable topics that often went unspoken. I could tell Dr. Carter's involvement wasn't about checking a box. It was about bringing real change into the community, a shift from passive tolerance to active understanding. I thought about how Ms. Evans had acted, how her moment of rejection had given way to her own reflection and personal growth. What if more people had the chance to confront their biases, as she had? What if they could do it in a space that allowed for learning, without shame or judgment? That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the ripple effect of what had happened in Dr. Carter's office. That one moment of confrontation, of discomfort, had set off a chain reaction. It wasn't just about Ms. Evans, though she was a part of it. It was about everyone involved. About me. About Dr. Carter. It became clear to me that the true value of that day wasn't in the fall, or the apology, or the karma that had come swiftly. It was in the opportunity that it created. The chance for reflection. The opening for a conversation that needed to happen, one that would allow real change to take root. I thought back to Dr. Carter's calm demeanor and his decision not to react with anger, but with professionalism and compassion. That, more than anything, had inspired Ms. Evans to rethink her stance, to ask herself difficult questions. And, perhaps, it had inspired me too. It had shown me that healing could happen in the most unexpected ways. I signed up for the program the next day. I knew that this was something that needed to be done, not just for others, but for myself, too. Because understanding, at its core, starts with us. It starts with the willingness to look inside, to acknowledge where we fall short, and to choose to be better. Maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something bigger than any of us had anticipated. As I sat in the first session of the Healing Through Understanding program, I realized how much had changed, not just in the lives of those directly involved, but in my own perspective. The room was filled with individuals of different backgrounds, each there to openly discuss experiences of discomfort, misunderstandings, and biases in the healthcare system. Dr. Carter, the driving force behind the initiative, was present too, not just as a doctor, but as a guide, facilitating the conversation with a calm yet firm presence. He wasn't there to point fingers or blame anyone. He was there to listen, to understand, and most importantly, to create a space where growth could happen. The first few minutes were awkward, the silence thick with hesitation. People shifted in their seats, unsure of how to start, unsure of how much they should reveal. But as Dr. Carter opened the floor to us, it was as if a dam had broken. Stories poured out, about feeling unheard, about feeling invisible, about judgments made without understanding. It wasn't just patients speaking, doctors and nurses shared their own experiences as well. They talked about the pressures they felt, about the assumptions they, too, had to fight. It wasn't a perfect conversation. Some said things that made others uncomfortable, but Dr. Carter was patient. He let each voice be heard. Then, when it was my turn, I shared my own reflection on that day in Dr. Carter's office, the awkwardness, the tension, the unexpected karma that had unfolded. I spoke about how I had witnessed Ms. Evans' moment of vulnerability, how, despite her initial resistance, she had found a way to admit her mistake. I talked about how that experience had shown me the true depth of human interaction, of the way people can change when given the chance. As I spoke, I noticed Ms. Evans sitting a few rows ahead of me, her expression thoughtful. She wasn't speaking, but her presence was there, a silent testament to how far she had come since that day. The session ended, but the conversation didn't. Dr. Carter offered resources, and there were discussions about continuing this work outside the program. I left feeling lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. I wasn't sure exactly where this path would lead, but I knew I was on it, alongside others who were equally committed to learning, understanding, and growing. Weeks later, the program became a regular part of the practice, expanding to include patients and healthcare workers from all over the community. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. The healing process was ongoing, and it was not limited to one person or one incident. It was a collective effort, built on the foundation of compassion, understanding, and, most importantly, the willingness to confront difficult truths. As for Ms. Evans, I saw her a few times after that first meeting. Each time, her demeanor was more open, more reflective. I didn't know the full extent of her personal journey, but I could see the changes in her actions, the way she interacted with others, the kindness she had begun to show. In the end, karma wasn't just about swift retribution or punishment. It wasn't about getting what you deserved. It was about transformation, about the power of self-awareness, the capacity for change, and the quiet strength found in vulnerability. Dr. Carter had shown all of us that real growth comes not from resisting discomfort, but from leaning into it. It's about creating space for those difficult conversations, even when they seem impossible. And it's about remembering that, no matter who we are, we all have room to grow.